recorded, as you can hear. So this recording of this Microgrant Initiative for US JETs information session is going to be available on the USJETAA homepage for you to access after this. There's quite a few details we're going to go over today. So we want this to be a resource for you, an accessible resource that you can check anytime. So first I'm going to go over some housekeeping for this session today, this webinar session. As you heard, and as I said, this session is going to be recorded. You are not on camera, your questions are not on camera, so you don't have to worry about anything like that for today's session. We are open to you asking questions anytime. You can use the Q&A feature to ask the questions that you have. Because we're going over so much information, we are going to wait until the end to answer those questions because some of them may be answered naturally as we go through the slides today. So first, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Danielle Reed, as you can see from my name card here. I'm the coordinator of the Microgrant program at USJETAA. I was a JET, an ALT in Sendai City for 3 years, from 2011 to 2014. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jessica to introduce herself as well.
Good morning or good evening, depending on where you're sitting. My name is Jessica Livingston. I was an ALT in Hokkaido from 2003 to 2006. And ever since returning from the JET program, I have been involved in the Alumni Association at all different levels across the nation. And now I have the lucky seat of being the executive director for USJETAA. So that means I have the lucky job of supporting JETs and JET alumni across the nation now as my full-time job, which is lovely. Good morning, good evening, glad you're here and glad you're interested in taking advantage of this amazing opportunity.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Over to you, Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan at the US Embassy in Tokyo. I'm the English Language Outreach Coordinator, and in my position, we are offering grants to organizations such as USJETAA so that they can help us to promote the US-Japan relationship and promote grassroots internationalization. As you can hear, I'm not American. I'm actually Australian. I've never been on JET, but I was a CIR, a direct hire CIR for 15 years before starting at the embassy in this position 1.5 years ago. And originally I am an English as a foreign language teacher and French and Japanese teacher in Australia. So nice to meet you, and I'm really excited to hear some of the ideas that JET participants have for this program. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Megan. I appreciate it. Okay, now moving on to today's agenda. So during this info session, we are going to cover the following points. What is the Microgrant Initiative? The purpose and goals of the program? Who is eligible? And what are your obligations? What are the requirements for fulfilling the grant? We're briefly going to go over some of the projects that people have submitted in the past. Of course, we're looking forward to hearing any innovative new ideas that you might have as well. We'll cover the grant timeline in some detail. This timeline is also on our website, of course, for your reference. How to apply. We'll go over that briefly, as well as the selection process. The acceptance requirements, what we're looking for when we review your projects. And then we'll also be able to provide you with some support and resource links that you can access that may help you think about other ideas. And of course, we'll cover any questions that you may have at the end. So the Microgrant Initiative, I think it's been going now at USJETAA since about 2018, maybe a little earlier, but it's an initiative to provide small grants of $200 to about $1,000 to current US JET program participants. And these micro grants, these small grants, are intended to fund projects that introduce American culture, US culture, and our English language to your students and your Japanese community, your local communities where you're teaching in Japan. So this Microgrant Initiative is funded by the US Embassy Tokyo, which we're very appreciative of, thanks Megan, and administered by the US Japan Exchange and Teaching Program Alumni Association, or USJETAA. So I just want to pause here briefly and ask Jessica to introduce what USJETAA is, why we're operating this grant, I think some of you might be familiar with US JETAA, and this is just going to be kind of a high level overview, but Jessica, would you please?
Yeah, sure. So probably several of you are learning for the first time that there is actually a national nonprofit that represents and serves the US JET alumni community. And basically there was a demonstrated need for institutional capacity on a national level that would allow alums to engage more actively in the larger US-Japan context and better support our nationwide JETAA community. We have a lot of JET alumni in the United States. We're almost 40,000 strong now. So that's a really big community. And in general, JETs tend to be doers. We like to do stuff. And in 2015, we made it happen and US JETAA was officially established. And since then, we've continued to grow. We find ways to help current JETs and JET alums meaningfully bridge both Japan and the US and remain engaged with Japan and also each other. I think that when you guys get back from JET, you probably want to find a way to stay connected with Japan. And the JET Alumni Association, basically, it gives you that infrastructure to continue engaging with Japan. There's a difference between like passively loving Japan from your couch while you watch anime, you know, and meaningfully really engaging with Japan in your social or professional communities. And JETAA provides the space and the resources to do that. And to do that with people and friends that share your experience and your passion. And plus, let's just face it, JETs are really fun. No one can do a Nijikai like us. So it's really fun to have a wonderful community to hang out with and continue your US-Japan relationship with. So that's us in a nutshell.
Thanks, Jessica. It's a wonderful summary. Even before I joined US JETAA, as the microgrant coordinator in 2020, I often use them as a resource. I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for any professional development information or support. The Microgrant Initiative is just one of the many programs that US JETAA supports.
Yeah,
right.
when you return from JET, definitely become engaged. We have so many resources to help you bridge and get to that next step in life. And
absolutely.
Coming home is often rougher than going on JET. So we are here for you.
Yes, indeed. Thanks again. Okay. So the purpose and goals of the program. Obviously, one of the main purposes of this program is to promote English language learning and study abroad. That does not mean that your project has to be solely about this, but if it includes an aspect of English language learning and maybe highlights opportunities to study abroad, that does make your application more competitive. There are some key priority areas for this program that I'm actually going to ask Megan to talk a little bit more about because they are suggested by the embassy in Tokyo. We also strongly believe in each one of these purposes. And once again, if your project has some focus on one of these areas, it does make it a more competitive application. So Megan, please go ahead.
Okay, so Danielle, as you said, the main priority for the US Embassy in giving these grants is to promote English language education and also study abroad. So everything that we do traces back to this main goal that we would like to increase the number of Japanese students who study in the US. And it's a fact that this number has been decreasing. And there are many reasons for that, but one of them is that there are many more options on the table these days, and also the cost of living in the United States, some factors that are outside our that have nothing to do with anything that we can help with. But I would just like to mention some words that are thrown out in the embassy quite often as priority areas for English language learning and study abroad. We are highly interested in anything that involves girls. So girls empowerment, women in non-traditional areas of study like STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And one of the buzzwords that's come about in the last 6 months is subnational. So subnational just means below the national level. So if you're thinking of the embassy is doing work at the level of the Japanese government and the US government. We are very much concerned with grassroots exchanges, which is the very nature of the JET program, but also not just between the Japanese people and the American people, but if it involves other nations at the same time. This is also something that has been mentioned quite often in many of our meetings. And some of the things that I've heard about are like teacher exchanges with English teachers in Korea or in Taiwan or in other Asian countries that are close to Japan, but that have educational systems that are similar. And just anything. I know that when you're in the JET program and you're in a classroom, that takes up a lot of your time and your energy, and there is not much left over for other things. And to do these kind of exchanges, it costs money, it takes effort. So we are here to try to relieve some of that financial burden, and that's why we are offering these microgrants via the US JETAA, so that you guys can implement different programs that you feel would be appropriate in your community and things that are important to you. And if any of these areas are concerned with any of the topics that I've just mentioned, then for us that would be great and high priority and something that we would really welcome. That's all from me.
Thanks, Megan. I think those are really good points that hopefully some of the JETs on the call today or the webinar today can think about when planning their projects. I also wanted to point out this last bullet, sustainability. This is something that we look for. I think this is maybe one of the more challenging things to implement when you're on the JET program and you have a year-to-year contract. But what we mean by sustainability of the project isn't necessarily that you'll be around to run it forever, but that the project or some aspect of the project can continue in perpetuity going forward. Maybe after you leave the JET program, maybe your successor could take it over. And one common example of this is an English library, for example. If you're able to build a resource at the school of English language books, then that is something that your school will have and your students can access year over year. I think there are quite a few projects that can show this level of sustainability, and we are looking forward to seeing some of the things that you propose. So moving on to the next page here, the eligibility and obligation. So what is required of you? What do we require for you to apply to this program? So as you may have noticed, this is a program that is open to United States citizens. It's because it is funded by the US Embassy in Tokyo. And that is the general purpose of this program, is to introduce American or US culture to your students. You must be a current JET participant on the JET program to apply. You can be in any position, ALTs, CIRs, and those elusive SEAs. I don't know if any are on this webinar, but if you are, let us know. So majority of those who apply are probably ALTs, but we've had many CIRs apply also. You can have co-applicants and collaborators who can be non-JETs, so maybe your JTE or other members of the community, excuse me, in Japan that you work with or that you know. They can, and other maybe foreigners in the area that you're working with, and they also don't need to be US citizens, obviously, if you have a co-applicant or collaborator. The main applicant must be a US citizen, however. You must be able to carry out your proposed project. So what does this mean? We really want you to apply with the goal of finishing your project. Obviously, life happens, things come up, and in those situations, you're not just encouraged, you must reach out to us to let us know what's going on. We are here to help you. So if you start a project, if you're accepted for this grant, and then over the course of the project, something comes up that might prevent you from carrying it out, or there's a challenge, we are here to support you, to work with you through that, so that hopefully you'll be able to carry out your project. You also must submit an interim and a final report by the specified deadlines. I'll go over those deadlines when we review the timeline, but these are, the interim report especially is for us to just check in and see how you're doing. Open communication on this grant is highly, highly, highly encouraged. For many of you, this might be the first time you're applying to a grant. We're aware of that. I wasn't even sure I knew what grants were, but I didn't know what the structure was or what was required for a grant when I was an ALT. So we just want to make sure that we're staying in communication with you. And once again, we're here to help. So the final report also is an absolute must. This is something that is required for us to report back to the embassy about how the grant is going, how the microgrant program is going in general. And these final reports is how we get the information from you about your projects for us to continue being able to provide microgrants to future JETs as well. So there's just a really strong obligation to do that final report at the end of your project. It's not just to report on your project, but to help promote the program so that we can continue the program as well. You are only able to submit one application per grant cycle. So each applicant can only submit one application for each grant cycle. So if you have many, many ideas, then you'll have to wait and submit extra ideas during another open grant cycle. All unused funding must be returned to US JETAA. We are obligated to report where all those dollars go for this program. And if you budgeted and maybe your budget was just a little off and you weren't able to spend all the money that you requested, you must return it to US JETAA. And I'll get into this a bit later, but you also need to keep all of your receipts for every single thing that you purchase for this grant. This is new this year. US JETAA is going to implement an 80-20 funding rule. So at the beginning of your grant, you'll get 80% of the funding that is approved for your grant. So you can also request a certain amount, and US JETAA may review your grant and approve you up to a certain amount. So you might not receive the full amount of the funding that you've requested. And this particular rule means that the funding that is approved for you, you'll receive 80% upfront, and you'll receive 20% when you finalize your reports at the end of the grant cycle.
Danielle, I want to sorry,
yeah,
go back
please.
one. I just want to hop in real quick here and highlight a couple of things that Danielle already talked about. So one is this co-applicants and collaborators can be non-JETs and do not need to be US citizens. This was exactly what Megan was just talking about, sort of bringing in as many international, people or organizations as possible so that you can really internationalize your project as much as possible. So that's obviously not a requirement, but it sounds like it's a priority. So if it's something that you have the capability of doing, please think about that and include it in your proposal. The other point that I wanted to make was for your interim and final reports, these do not need to be like 20-page reports. I don't want you to go back to like your final, papers in university or anything, but they do need to be, they can be actually quite short as long as they get your point across. So I don't want you to think of this as a huge sort of writing burden that you have to, be up against, but just be aware that they do need to be submitted. They are very important, but they don't need to be huge projects that are looming over you. The other part is the funding that has to be returned to US JETAA, just like you're in Japan on tax on Japanese taxpayers' money. If you think about where the money for this microgrant comes from, it ultimately comes from US taxpayers. And so we do need to think about that, be conscientious of that, which is why the reporting is required and also why returning unused funding is so important. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a larger overall picture of those points. Thanks.
No, thanks so much for that additional clarification. And I'll even go one step further and say for the interim and final report, we provide a format. So it's a question response format. So answering those, like Jessica said, we do not want them to be overly burdensome. We just need to know the information about how your project went. So thanks so much, Jessica, for jumping in on that one. And microgrant projects. I think this is something that everyone is interested in. There are lists of past microgrant projects on our website that you can read about. This is just a small sampling of the types of projects that people have submitted. Obviously, hosting cultural events. These can be related to even something very specific in your hometown. There was a recent grantee who submitted a proposal to focus on a book from her hometown in Yuma, Arizona, that is about making rock art. And this is for elementary school students. And then she was able to have her students in Japan make some rock art and create a little story around their rock, and have some students in the US and in Yuma, Arizona do the same thing. So it can be something like that, very kind of hyper local cultural. Someone did recently a lot about New Orleans and some of the local traditions there. There's also Black history events, especially during the month of February, that we've funded in the past. So really the sky's the limit here. America's multicultural place. You can introduce many aspects of American culture to your classrooms. Share study abroad and scholarship information. We have funded scholarships for students to pursue study abroad in the United States. This was a challenge during the pandemic, as you may imagine, but it is something that's becoming more possible again. So that's a direct correlation to one of the challenges at the embassy that Megan brought up, and something that you can focus on. One of our more kind of common projects that we have funded is a pen pal exchange. So if you can connect classrooms in the US and Japan, that's wonderful. Another fairly common project is English resource library at the school, purchasing English books and creating a physical resource. And I want to go back and mention that cooking has been a big project area as well, especially when sharing cultures from the United States and engaging your students in kind of a fun way while learning English. This is by no means inclusive of all projects that have been submitted. We had a really fun one this year. I thought from Aomori, where the entire grade level, I think 60, maybe even 70 plus students built snowmen and discussed the differences between how we build snowmen in America with the 3 balls as opposed to Japan, where there's typically 2. And in addition to that, there was a lesson on geography and weather and why those weather patterns form and why you get so much snow in Aomori in comparison to where the jet was from, which was a very snowy place in the United States. So that you can get creative, think outside the box. Those pictures were adorable. We got a lot of half melted snowmen. I think the temperature got away from them that day, but the experience that the students had was really wonderful. And we had quite an enthusiastic final report from that micrograntee. So yeah, think outside the box. We're interested to see what ideas you may have. Okay. Microgrant timeline. You do not have to be like this poor woman on the screen who is running from her deadline, which is happily chasing her. We present the timeline at the beginning so that you can think about the timeline and how it's going to affect your project and maybe your contract. I know some of you may, if you're leaving in August, this might not be the time for you to work on this project, but if you're in the middle of your JET career, then yeah, please note the application dates here. So applications are due by May 31st, Memorial Day, if you're from the US, which you should be if you're applying, at 11:59 p.m. JST. So slightly different timeline here. So we're focused on your timeline in Japan. Grantees will be selected and notified in the summer in July 2023. Projects can start, they can commence when you sign the grant agreement, which I'll go over, I think, on the next page. But the grant agreement is an essential part. Signing the grant agreement is an essential part of beginning your project. That's where we lay out all the details and all the requirements for your project. And funding dispersals will begin in August 2023. So some people have different times of year they want to conduct their project. So if your project's not happening until February, then your funding dispersal may come a little bit later. But we want to start funding projects in August 2023. Funded projects must be completed within the grant year. So we have 1 year set aside here for you to complete your project. So your project can start and end anytime during this year from August 1st, 2023 to July 1st, 2024. So if you are, interested in doing something over the summer, then you have a couple opportunities either this year if you can get your project started in August, or you can wait until next year in June or July to do your project, or not July, sorry, June, as long as it's within this term. If you want to do something over the winter, your project start date can be in February. There is a place in the application to write a project start and a project end date. And we use those dates that you select to give you, to check in with you about interim reports and final reports due dates as well. Because as you can see, the final reports are due within 30 days of your project end date, as noted on your application. This is the date that you select when you submit your project or when you submit your application. So you'll get some reminders from me around that time period, just letting you know hey, your final report is due soon. You need to collect those, but I would really appreciate it if you apply and you're just mindful of this timeline and when these deadlines are coming up. And the progress report or interim report is going to be due on Leap Day, February 29th, 2024. I don't often get to say that date. So memorable. I hope no one forgets when the interim report is due next year. Okay. Great. And this timeline is also on our website. And if you have any questions about it at all, please feel free to contact us at any time. We're happy to answer those questions. How to apply. So as I mentioned previously, completed applications must be received by May 31st. We also highly recommend discussing your project with any stakeholders who are people in your community, at your organization, even your students, anyone who might be impacted by your project. You want kind of proof of concept when you submit a project, like whose buy-in do you have? And you want to do that before you submit your application if you can. That's one of the reasons why we're having this grant cycle start in August with current JETs. So you might have some time to talk to your community as well. I don't think anyone on this call is a new JET, possibly, unless the cycles are really got away from me for when people are starting. But just please engage your community as much as you can with this. You're going to need their support to finish these projects. And you can check out the FAQ we have on the website if you have any questions. A lot of these kind of questions are addressed in that FAQ. You can fill out the application online. It's on our main page for the Microgrant program, which I think Jessica's probably shared this link in the chat, or maybe you can see it online already. And so you're aware of what this application requires. It's not an overly long application. It shouldn't take you too long to fill out after you have a concept and an idea. But the key components include your contact information, of course, any co-applicants, collaborators, a project description and title. I want to pause here. This project description and title is what we use to talk about your grant. So whatever title you write is the title that will appear on our website when we talk about projects or your project specifically. So please be mindful of that when you're creating a title for your project. And a project description too should be about 2 to 3 sentences about like a short description that we can also share on our website and other materials. So just when you're crafting those, think about where they're going to appear as well. And once again, if you have any questions about those specifically, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. You should note the project audience, whether it's students or the wider community in your area. Potential impact. Impact is bold because this is very important. How is your project going to benefit the community that you're in? What are some of the main ways that, if you think about it, pre your project, what is the current state? And then post your project, what has improved? What is better? What resources do people have now that they didn't have before? Or what activities did they engage in that maybe help them have a broader image of the United States? So impact can take many forms and shapes, but just be mindful of it and think about it while you're applying or when you submit your application. Proposed project dates are the dates I was referring to, your start date and end date that can take place within any period of time within the greater project year for this grant. The proposed grant amount, the minimum amount that we award is $200, and the maximum amount that we award is $1,000. And you'll also submit a project budget. There are some examples on the application as well of what that might look like, what line items we accept. For example, we want to know what the cost of your materials are. If you're doing an English library, what's the cost of your books? If you have shipping costs, what are those? So that's kind of the basics of a project budget. And I saw you unmuted, Jessica. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, so I did want to bring up, so Danielle talked about discussing your project with stakeholders or community, people in your community. This is such a fantastic opportunity for, I mean, that obviously has practical reasons, right? Why, right? So that we can understand and you can understand sort of who's going to be involved with this. But this is also such a, an opportunity for you to get more involved in your community. And I know most JETs, I was a rural JET as well, like your community can be really small. But whether it's small or whether it's big, there are people out there that you haven't had an opportunity to engage with yet. And this project can really be a vehicle for you to make closer ties and create some of those relationships in your community. And I always tell people I was a JET coordinator for a long time. So I was the person that sent off my JETs. And I feel like JET is exactly like university. You get out of it what you put into it. So if you take the time to build those relationships and do a microgrant project, your fulfillment of your time on JET is going to be that much deeper, and the impact you have on your community, what you're going to leave them with, is going to be that much deeper. So really take advantage of using this microgrant to make those community connections. It's going to come back, 100-fold to you. And then the other part is, as you're crafting your application, if you have questions or you're not sure if something's going to work, or you don't know if your outside the box idea is too far outside the box or whatever, get in touch with us. Like, we're not the scary people that are here to, doling out money and holding it over your head. We want you to succeed. Danielle and I were at JETs, and Megan had, very similar experience, even though she didn't, fall under the umbrella of JET. She had that same experience in Japan. So we're here. We want you to be successful. We want your project to be successful. So if you have questions, get in touch with us. That's what we're 100% happy to talk to you and brainstorm ideas, or, help you sort of think through things. So do it up front so that you're not sort of stuck midway through or at the end trying to figure out how to make your ends meet. Take advantage of us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most fun parts of working on this program. I mean, how awesome is it that I get to work on a program that provides funding to JETs to support their communities? It's really a wonderful part of my job that I look forward to. So yeah, in fact, reach out, please. Happy to hear from you. Great. So the selection process. I'm just going to highlight some points about what we're looking for when we review projects. Basically, the things that I mentioned previously. We want to know the mission, like the goals of your project, what its potential impact is, and the feasibility, the kind of doability of your project. Can you actually achieve what you've submitted? If you submit a project stating that you want to achieve world peace and start from your community, then I might raise an eyebrow about what's really possible with $1,000. But just like something like that, just think about how practical it is to pull off your project also. And your project is also going to be evaluated on those points we mentioned that we're looking for regarding the main goals. Does it promote English language education? Does it encourage future travel and study in the United States? Does it introduce American culture, which is very multicultural, a very broad category here, to communities and schools within Japan? So those are some of the things that we look for when selecting projects. And if you can state clearly how you're going to achieve some of these things, how you're achieving the goals, what the potential impact is, if you can clearly explain how you're going, the steps to take your project from start to end, then it's much more likely to be funded. Acceptance requirements. So remember I said I was going to come back to this grant agreement. Accepted grantees must sign and agree to the terms and conditions of the grant. This is going to take shape in a grant agreement. That grant agreement is going to lay out aspects of your proposal and your application, such as the funding level, dates, times that you've stated in your application for your project. It's also going to list some additional requirements that we have regarding usage of logos, for example, USJETAA's logos and the US Embassy of Tokyo's logos. And it's going to also require you to submit the interim and final report. Those are kind of the main elements of the grant agreement. And we cannot fund your project until you sign the grant agreement. This has been a weird stopgap in the past for some grantees. They'll go through the whole process. We'll send them an acceptance notice, and then we kind of stumble around getting the grant signed because I think they believe that it's over when they get that acceptance notice. But you need to complete the agreement. You also must record and maintain financial records, including sharing copies of all receipts with US JETAA. So if you purchase anything with this grant funding, keep that receipt, take a picture of it immediately. We need a record of how that funding is being spent. So that's one of the higher level reporting requirements from this. It's not an overly burdensome process for you, but this is an essential requirement for your reporting on this grant. And contact US JETAA with any project changes as they occur. So I think in the past I've mentioned this, but I haven't emphasized enough that we're not just trying to check in during the interim report or the final reporting phase to see how things are going. If something comes up, especially a major change, discuss it with us when it's happening so that we can be prepared or ask you or how things are going, or maybe even provide an extension on your timeline if you need it. We're here to work with you, as Jessica said, to complete the project. We want you to succeed. It's good for everybody. So as they occur is the kind of essential point here if something major happens. So, or even minor, we're happy to hear about minor changes as well. Any change with your project, let us know. Okay. And support and resources. So as I mentioned before, US JETAA has a lot of resources at your disposal. So we, the people here working on this, are available for advice and questions. We also have Japanese language resources about the Microgrant program on our website. If you need some help kind of contextualizing and explaining this to your JTEs or people in your community, we found having the Japanese language resource about this program is really helpful. We have some resource guides like the FAQ as well. We also have a Facebook group, which I know is probably a bit outdated at this point, but we will share that as well. The Facebook group has a lot of past grantees in it. And I wanted to ask Megan, I asked Megan to stay on for this call to help share some of these resources as well that the US Embassy in Tokyo can provide. They're also a resource for you.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, as Danielle has just said, if there are any problems that you encounter, reach out to US JETAA, but also feel free to reach out to us here at the Embassy. Oftentimes we have connections, we have contacts, we might have resources that we can give you. We certainly have extensive experience in running different programs, so we might have advice that would be useful in the case that you needed it for your program. And just as it says there, the US Embassy in Tokyo has many different resources for Japanese teachers of English, but also for JET program participants or other US citizens who are teaching English. We have State Department produced English language resources that includes things from like CDs and music in English with flashcard sets, way through all the way through to how to run English language clubs in schools or how to teach grammar in English. Many different resources that we can send you. And as you can see there, the next one says Education USA. I'm just about to put in the chat box.
Megan, I think you're on mute.
Sorry,
yes.
we just got a Japanese version of our website, so it's in the chat box now. It's educationusa.jp. So if you have any students who have even given you an inkling that they're interested in studying abroad at some point in their future, or even during their school days, please point them to this website because we can offer free, unbiased, up-to-date information for students and teachers and parents about the range of education options in the United States. And even if you have a teacher that you work with and you feel like this teacher is a really up and coming teacher, they have so much potential. Maybe they're interested in doing a master's. Maybe they're interested in a certain topic of study. We also have many different options for this level of student in the United States. So they are also free to contact us at Education USA for any information that they might need. And I'm just going to put in another, let's see. Okay. Okay, and I just put in another resource here, which is our American English website. And on that website, you can find basically anything. If you're trying to teach grammar, you can search for the grammar point that you are trying to teach, and you will find textbooks, you will find printable PDF files, you might find games, online webinars, many different resources that you can use. So please feel free to use this. It's all free. You can make it your own. It's open, so you can change it however you want to suit your audience. You can please share it with your teachers, share it with anyone you know. This is for anyone, not even just Americans. Anybody who is interested in using these resources is free to do so. And the US Embassy in Tokyo also has some teacher training opportunities, and I'm often spamming, I won't say spamming, but I'm often sending out emails we have about 100 JET program participants who've registered to say that they would like to have emails from us. So if you're not currently on our mailing address, please feel free to reach out to Jessica or Danielle and let them know that you'd like to be on it, because I send out an email once a month, and it has lots of different information about programs that we are running. Oftentimes there are opportunities for teachers to participate in teacher training that is run by Japanese universities here in Tokyo as well, or in other parts of Japan as well. So if you're interested, please sign up for that. And I think I've just about covered everything, but as I said, please feel free to reach out to us at any point. Even if it seems like a ridiculous question, I can always ask around. The answer might be no, but you never know until you ask.
Very true. Yes. And thank you so much, Megan. Yeah, we have lots and lots of resources at your fingertips available to you as you go through this process. So please take advantage of them and check out what we have available to you. Okay. And that actually brings us to the end of our formal presentation, and it is time for Q&A. I know there's some questions already in the chat box. If you haven't already, and I think that Jessica might have shared this in the chat as well, these are our email addresses. So they're pretty easy to remember. I'm Danielle at USJETAA.org. Jessica's Jessica at USJETAA.org. So like we said, email us anytime. And this is the link to join our microgrant group on Facebook if you are still on Facebook and are interested in connecting with our past micrograntees, and of course our website. And we encourage you as well to join USJETAA so that we can remain connected and that you can once again take advantage of the resources that we offer through the website. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can address some of the questions that you have in chat and the Q&A.
So I didn't get any questions in the chat yet.
Okay.
So if anybody has any, this is your time to ask. Otherwise, you just get to listen to us talk for a little while longer.
Well, there's actually quite a few questions in the Q&A feature. And
oh, in the Q&A feature. Okay,
yeah,
good.
in the Q&A feature. We've got Hyogo Prefecture in the group here as well. So one of the questions that was asked, and I might ask for some clarity on this one, is how about funding summer program fees? Summer programs as in English learning programs for students. If you're still on and you're able to clarify a little bit in the Q&A, I just want to make sure I understand what type of summer program you're referring to. Do you have any just throwing out there, Jessica?
I think so. I may have actually connected with Aya previously, and Her question in particular, but I've seen other other programs like this, were like if somebody's running a summer program in Japan somewhere, that's English language based. And I know like there's like English language camps and English language, music camps and all this kind of stuff. So if there's something like that, can they use the microgrant funding to help financially support a student or students to attend those?
Okay. Got it. And I think a lot of it has to do with how you draft that in your application. There are some cases in which I think yes, but we need to know a little bit more about the program, that it matches the purpose of the grant.
Yeah, I think the main point here would be to frame it appropriately. So once you have details about your summer, the summer program that you're hoping to provide students access to, you basically want to tease out what that summer program is offering and match it up with the missions and the goals of the grant, the microgrant program itself. So those are the threads you're looking for, are those sort of matching missions and matching goals. And so you want to try and do that as much as possible so you can present your grant proposal in a positive light.
Exactly. And I think, Megan, I think you might have to leave. So I just wanted to thank you so much for your time on the webinar as well and for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know you're so busy
thank
too.
you. If it's okay, I'm going to drop off here.
Yes.
But if there are any other questions that need clarifying from my end, then please contact me and I'll get back to you.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day. Everyone have a great evening in Japan.
Bye.
Yeah, and just back to the Q&A feature, it seems the chat is disabled, so no one could type anything in the chat. I think they can see the chat though, but they can't respond in the chat. Thanks for mentioning that, in the Q&A.
It might be a feature of the webinar itself.
Right, so okay. I apologize for that. I know I mentioned responding in the chat a few times, but we are reading the Q&A. There's a good question here about, have there been any previous grant applications involving sports? Mentioning that some JTs have been hosting flag football practices and games and have been looking for funding to purchase more equipment, involve more teachers, students, and community members. And the short answer is absolutely. Sports have been a big part of past microgrant applications, including hosting American cultural sports days. And I think even to your point, this specific, it wasn't flag football, it was Frisbee, ultimate Frisbee. there were some Frisbees purchased for students through this grant as well. So yes, answer to that question. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, again, this is just one, it's the same as the other one. You just want to draw out as many, threads as possible that speak to the mission and the goal of the microgrant program. And as you go, forward in life, even after JET, and if you are working with grants at all grants are like this. Each grant has their own mission and their own purpose. And so as you apply for that grant, you want to take a look and see what that mission and purpose is. And you just want to, what you're trying to do is sort of find the overlap between what you want to do and what the microgrant or what the grant program's purpose is. And you're trying to find that overlap in the Venn diagram. And that's what you want to highlight. So finding, figuring out what your project is, figuring out what the mission of the grant is, and how can you highlight where they overlap so that you can really put together a strong grant proposal. There's another question about study abroad programs accessible to those with low level English. I would say any of us that have been ALTs realize that we are not dealing necessarily with master's level students as far as English language acquisition goes when you are an ALT and you've got kids all over the board. And so, yeah, it doesn't really matter what language, what their level of English is. The point of this is just to get them more engaged and more interested in the United States or potentially coming to the United States for study. And so that's what you're trying to feed. You're trying to feed their curiosity and their interest. So they don't have to, be at a certain language level at all.
Yeah, and if the question is about what is available to them out there, then I would definitely use some of the resources that the US Embassy Tokyo shared. I think there are short-term programs and other programs that address this that don't even require English language to participate. But I would definitely check that out and look into some of those resources that are available. Okay, so I think that addressed all the questions that we currently have in the chat. I don't know if anyone has any more questions.
I wanted to bring one last thing up. This actually has nothing to do with the microgrant, but while we're on a call with the US Embassy, I did want to point out to all the US JETs that are here, if you have not registered with the US State Department about being or living overseas in Japan, it's a really great idea to do that. This is just for your own safety. Like if there's another, major earthquake or whatever, I'm thinking about the recent earthquake that was in, where was that? Ishikawa, Ken, I think. But it's a really great resource for the US government to be able to keep track of where its citizens are in Japan and just ensure that everybody is safe in case something like that happens. So I'm going to try and find it real quick, the US State Department.
Yeah, it was something that I enrolled in when I was there, and I was in Tohoku, I was in Sendai in Miyagi-ken. And so the consulate that I registered with was actually the Sapporo consulate would give me updates about what was happening, and I found those to be really useful. You may have also noticed my jet year when I departed was in 2011, the year of the Great East Japan earthquake. I went to Sendai right after that. And it was very valuable to have that connection to the US Embassy system as a US citizen in Japan for information and resources as well.
Okay, I found the link. I'm going to put it in the chat, even though nobody can write in the chat. Hopefully you can see it.
I think people can view the chat, so hopefully they're able to get some of these links.
So just like Danielle mentioned, I was the a JET program coordinator during the Big East, the Tohoku earthquake in 2011, and it was really stressful to to hunt down all of I call them my jets, but my jets that were in Japan. So this is just an easy way to register yourself with the State Department so that people can keep track of you if something happens like that, and hopefully nothing does. But that's my completely non-microgrant piece of advice today.
Great. And if you do have any questions about the microgrant that you did not think of on this call, as always, you can email us, ask us. We're happy to answer them. You have a couple weeks to fill out the application. There's a lot more information available on our website as well. And we look forward to hearing or learning about the types of projects that you're interested in doing. This is one of the, like I said before, I really enjoy this part of my job, the creativity of the JET community and people's willingness to take this extra step to support your community, to access this type of funding, even though it's a micro grant and it may seem like a small amount of funding, people have been able to do some pretty wonderful things with that, I think, and make some big changes in their local communities. So I have a lot of respect for everybody who's spending their evening on this webinar with us to learn more about this process, who's interested in pursuing a grant for your community.
All right, thank you everyone so much for your time. I hope life is going well for you while you're in Japan on the JET program. We're excited to hear from all of you about your projects. And like Danielle said, if you have questions, please get in touch with us. We're happy to help brainstorm or just help you figure out what how to frame it if you need help in that area. So without further ado, we'll stop the recording. Yes.